Pulgasari, not to be confused with Bulgasari, a South Korean monster movie which is interesting for its own reasons, is a 1985 kaiju movie directed by Shin Sang-ok and Chung Gon-cho. Sorry for any mispronunciation. It's a movie known for the country it was made in, North Korea. This commonly gives it the title, the North Korean Godzilla movie, and the film itself was produced by Kim Jong-il, the father of Kim Jong-un. This already places it into an interesting place of tokusatsu, kaiju, and overall film history, and I believe that a remade movie today could have its own place. Now, you might have some questions before we dive into the film, like, what's a Pulgasari? Who is Shin Sang-ok? And more. As previously mentioned, this film was made in the Hermit Kingdom, which isn't exactly known for their movies, but the current leader at the time, Kim Il-sung, had a son, Kim Jong-il, say that 5 times fast, who was obsessed with movies. He even wrote a book called On the Art of Cinema. This obsession led him to making many movies, the primary one being Pulgasari, which leads us to the director, Shin Sang-ok, and how he got to North Korea. After his ex-wife was kidnapped in Hong Kong, he tried to investigate and was kidnapped too. It's North Korea, what did you expect? Anything else? While being held by North Korea, him and his ex-wife were forced to make movies and even remarried. In total, he made 7, with the last one being Pulgasari. This ended while they were at the Vienna Film Festival, where they escaped together. They had finally made it to freedom. Now, before we can get into the movie itself, what's a Pulgasari? A Pulgasari is a monster from Korean mythology that eats metal. In the myth I found, it was created by a monk trying to evade the police. He created a figure out of rice and fed it needles. When it came to life, the more metal it ate, the bigger it became. So the military went at it with swords and arrows. It ate the swords and arrows, so they tried fire. It then carried the fire and burned down a local village. This is where the myths of it change. The one I read, it was defeated in hand-to-hand combat by monks. In some other myths, it just leaves. The Pulgasari itself was described as an elephant, a rhino, a bear, a tiger, and a bull, mixed together. The movie differs from that appearance. In fact, both the North and South Korean versions have monsters that look nothing like how it was described. Now, without a further ado, let's dive into the movie. The movie is set in feudal Korea during the Goryeo, again, sorry for any mispronunciation, dynasty, as our story begins with a woman asking her sister for water. The rest of her family is working for a blacksmith nearby, with the blacksmith being her father, uncle. For all I know, he could be both. It was her father. He then finds some hidden tools hidden in a grass patch right next to the shack. Great spot to hide something, guys. This leads to him calling his nephew a wrench and the leader of the bandits. It's also revealed he wanted his nephew, whose name is Inde, to marry his daughter, whose name is Ami. It took me like a second to think about the implications of that, but it weirded me out. Don't think about it too much. We then see Inde training with a sword, and Ami walks up. They say a whole lot of nothing. And then Inde goes into the mountains. But then, suddenly, the governor appears, whose bodyguard has one of the craziest fits I have ever seen. Like, look at that beard. Anyways, the governor is commissioning weapons from the blacksmith, only to learn there's no iron. So what does he do? Does he leave defeated? Give them iron to make the weapons? No, he brings in farming equipment and takes ownership of the town. They then steal the farming equipment of the town folk and kidnap the kids. This causes a massive fight, and Inde is threatened with his life, as well as taken. Also, they managed to get the farming equipment from the soldiers, but it didn't show how they got it. It then cuts to the blacksmith being tortured and blaming the missing iron on Pulgasari. The blacksmith is then thrown in prison without food, so in protest, Inde won't eat, and the governor governor gets really upset, but like, don't you want them to suffer? Just let them starve for a little bit. Anyways, Ami tries to bring her father food and is thrown out by the guards, but they manage to get to their father and throw food up to him, as he sculpts a figure and prays to it to save humanity before dying. As they cut his body out, Ami grabs the figure he made from his hands. While sewing later, she cuts her hand as a drop of blood awakens Pulgasari. He then eats some sewing needles. They also sleep in the same bed as him, but it's like, if you roll over, he's kinda dead. So they just like let him sleep in a drawer or a pot or something. But he goes in his sleep. I know what I said. And starts eating a rock. This reminds me of one of those black hole games where you eat the bushes and become bigger and then eat galaxies and whatever. Because it's exactly like that, in all honesty. Like, he then escapes and begins eating metal in the forge. Then Ami calls Inde Brother Inde, which makes the incest line earlier, like, worse by, like, a long shot. Also, he's being executed with the executioner having, like, a goofy Mephiles laugh. The executioner is stopped by Pulgasari eating the sword and cuffs holding Inde down. This whole scene is just absurdly bizarre. Like, it's like this got weird music and shit. The governor then goes to check out Pulgasari, who's just kind of roaming around. I'd also like to mention this scene is actually pretty effective at making the governor seem weak, and the main characters brave how they've been interacting with Pulgasari up until this point. Granted, Ami and Inde really only interacted with it when it was a tiny baby, and now it's the size of a toddler or some shit. But it's still pretty decent. Doesn't mean it's the greatest character building scene, but you know, credits due where credits due. Anyways, Pulgasari bursts through the wall and leaves. Meanwhile, Ami and her brother, who has a name, it's just said like twice in the entire movie, are looking for him. They eventually find him in the stream bothering some fish, and he steals some farming equipment from them. Why'd they have farming equipment? I don't know. It then cuts to a torture scene where the soldiers are beating an old lady. Inde and his men are training in a cave somewhere, and Ami comes in revealing her brother was taken. Now you might be confused. Don't worry, I am too. There was no scene establishing how Ami knew where Inde was, or scene showing her brother being kidnapped. He's also dead, I think, but apparently he's not, as later in the movie. But either way, Inde attacks the governor as it magically turns to day. It then cuts to an army being scalded, and we meet General Fawn and the king, the king is getting General Fawn to hunt the bandits, which is run by Inde. Does that make sense? Good. He then rides off, and Inde gives a speech right before the big battle. General Fawn and his army are then rolled over by boulders. That's exactly. Yeah. Some stuff happens. A dude is direct hit by some arrows as his friends are bull rushed by a bunch of soldiers. They kidnap Ami, but are stopped by Pulgasari. It then cuts to another big battle with Pulgasari on the front lines, which strangely reminds me of the meme from a few years back where Freddy Fazbear was edited into war photos. Anyways, they pay him back by feeding him the enemy's weapons as he grows bigger and bigger, until he needs to be put, get this, into a composite shot with the humans. After General Fawn strategizes to defeat Pulgasari, before we cut back to Inde and his army having a festival, which on another side note, the Pulgasari suit is actually kind of phenomenal, even though it strays so far from the mythology. I love its design, and I love the texture and sculpting. Overall, it's like an A-tier suit. And Ami was kidnapped, by the way. So Pulgasari has to save her, but in which he is forced into a giant cage. Which raises a question. Where and how did they make such a big cage and fast? Also, then they try to light Pulgasari on fire. Yeah. Just like the myth, guys. This makes everyone run away in an effort to cross over a tiny river in a bunch of rowboats. Real great planning, guys. This leads Inde and his men launching an attack on the king. So how does General Fawn respond? He digs a big hole, but needs more time to dig it. Pulgasari then appears, takes some rocket ballista shots, and smashes a palace to pieces, and the hole is complete. And General Fawn exorcises the blacksmith's spirit from Pulgasari. Pulgasari then falls into the pit and is covered in rocks. Yep. He's just like that now. They get him, don't worry. It's like after a big battle, and then Ami infiltrates a bunch of like bars and stuff, and then she brings him back to life by magic shit or something. I really don't know. And then once General Fawn finds out, he's like, yeah, we're making giant metal cylinders filled with explosives. So bombs. But they're not bombs. They're guns. Two, in fact. In fact, they would be able to kill 104 Pulgasaris, notes the king. Except they can't kill one, he just tanks all the hits and goes and eats them later on. He then breaks the castle and steps on the king and crushes General Fawn. And that's kind of how the movie ends. He just becomes greedy, eats some more, and then he eats Ami. The end. Yeah, I don't know either. This was a weird movie. I don't really know what to say. It was far from good. It was incoherent, slow, filled with a lot of nothing. It had weird transitions and skipped over a lot of things that you'd think to be important. But my biggest complaint is the sound design. I hate the sound effects of the swords attacking. It sounds like lasers, and it hurts me. Soundtrack itself was awful. When that dude was getting executed, it started playing a freaking like circus soundtrack or whatever. And the first 40 seconds of the movie, I thought I was watching a dub, honestly, because of how weird the audio mixing was. Which I might have. If that is the case, then I retract my statement here. But there were some good parts. The Pulgasari suit was beautiful, and the miniatures were good, especially for what they actually were. That's it. Like, only watch it if you just want to watch a North Korean monster movie. There's nothing more to it. Now, I think it's no secret we overuse a lot of resources on small things, especially metals when talking about phones or electronic cars or other electronics being made in mass. But alongside that, we have massive uses for metal in building construction, which, while not nearly as wasteful as making 4,000 iPhones a day, with only 200 being sold, whatever, ignore my statistics, it's still a lot of metal that we're using. So how long do we have until we're completely out of natural resources? Probably not soon, but what if it was soon? This is where the idea of a modern Pulgasari movie came to me. What if Pulgasari awakens in the modern day, only to find there are no resources left? This leads him to attacking cities in search for food. There are a few other ways a modern Pulgasari story could be told, but I think the center of the idea would be the same, a commentary on greed and how it's, in fact, is slowly destroying societies, especially in the modern day with, neo-industrialization. Pulgasari himself could be a metaphor for greed, or just a higher-up in a company, or, something along those lines. And there's a lot of different ways that this story can be done, so tell me more of your ideas. This video was me just trying to share a cool idea I had on how an interesting monster can be brought back, and how monsters reflect on our society. I would like to do more of these types of videos, so if you would do so, like, share, and subscribe. But most importantly, have a nice day.